Uh, Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Australian Reptile Q&A with your host, Manish Bourneman. It's good to see you guys back. I just wanted to make sure everything's working here. Welcome to today's show. We're going to have a little chat about green tree pythons because it seems like every episode that we've got of this show, somebody has to ask something about green tree pythons. So I thought, who else is better to get on the show than Darren Boswell and Daniel Boswell. They are breeders, South Australian breeders that work with green tree, or Darren used to work with green tree pythons in the early days of green tree python keeping, and Daniel is currently busy with quite a nice collection of Australian and designer green tree pythons. So without any ado, let's get them into the show. Just Brent Smith is also helping me out today. Because they have nothing to do in Sydney because they're in lockdown. So let me get them into the show. G'day, Darren, Daniel,
G'day.
and
Smith.
Howdy, guys.
Yes, so welcome to the show, guys.
Okay.
So I'm hoping all the sound works. We tried everything beforehand, and everything seemed to work all right. Let me just get the chat over onto the side here. There's not going to be a real. There's no real. I don't really have a structure in mind for the show today. I want to find out a little bit more from Daniel about his history. We've had Darren on before. We spoke about some of the. He's been involved in reptiles for. How many years have you been involved in the reptiles in Australia, Darren?
Oh, I had to be 30.
Yeah.
All up.
And you've kept what? And just give us a list of the type of stuff that you've worked with over that period. What type of stuff have you been sort of specialising in over that time?
In the early days, jungle carpets, womas, blackheads, and then eventually the green trees.
And have you ever kept lizards?
Yeah, we had a few small species of monitors for a while. Had some Stores monitors, some Tristis, Barichi monitors, and a couple of Ackies. Sort of lasted for a few years, and my partner, she sort of lost interest. And as anyone who keeps monitors knows, particularly small ones, they take a fair bit of maintenance and work. So, yeah, I ended up moving them on.
I think your internet, for some reason, has slowed up a bit there, Darren. Because
the picture's frozen, I think, but the audio's okay.
Yeah, Daniel's. What I think your dad must have the older phone between the two of you.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, it's a S8 Samsung.
No, that's all right. Okay, so so Daniel, give us a little bit of a background on how did you start with? I said something to you before, and I'm assuming it started with you caught the bug from your dad when you were a kid. But give us a little bit of background about yourself, mate.
Yeah, I guess growing up, Dad always having reptiles, snakes, and always had a big appreciation for them. As a kid, I wouldn't say I was, over the moon with them, but I always appreciated looking at them. And then it wasn't until my early 20s I started to think, wouldn't mind getting into keeping a snake.
Yeah.
So my first one was from a local pet store, and it was a wild type Darwin.
Yeah.
And then from there, went into keeping womas, some blackheads. That's where it all began. But I always wanted to keep green tree pythons, and obviously started from when Dad had them. And while keeping those reptiles, I was always researching green trees, and it was always what I wanted to work towards. And yeah,
that's right. And so you only keeping green tree pythons at the moment?
At the moment, yeah.
I made the decision a few years ago, didn't he, to let everything else go and just concentrate on the greens?
Because I went through a divorce and I had to move all my animals on. Yeah. So I had a couple of years where I wasn't keeping, and then I got back into it. picked up some albino Darwins from Southern Cross, some more blackheads, some more wormers, and after a year or so, I was really ready to look into getting a green tree, and Michael Cermak had a female up on his Facebook page, The Green Effect. It was a 15-month female, and I reached out to him, had a bit of a chat, and acquired that animal, and that was my first green tree. And yeah, I ended up moving all of my carpets and blackheads and wormers on, and I've just grown the green tree collection.
Was there an overlap? So Darren, when did you stop keeping green tree pythons? Was there like how many years went in between you keeping greens to when Daniel started keeping greens?
So I stopped keeping them completely in about 2009. But there was a gap there, sort of when I had my theft. I didn't keep any for a while. And I ended up, one of the people that was really good to me through all that was John Weigel. And after I'd sort of got through all that, he sent me a pair of rough scale pythons. And, he said he didn't want me to leave the hobby. He didn't want to let it beat me. And I ended up down the track, swapped them for a pair of BX with Jared Sharp, and had those till about 2009. That's the ones I sent you the pictures of last night or yesterday.
Oh yes, we'll have a look at some of these animals as well. And so and I don't want to forget about my wingman over up the top there. He's just I don't know. He hasn't he's just sitting back quietly and observing the conversation. Brent, you're not new to green tree pythons either. Give us a little bit of a rundown there. What are you playing with?
Far from a pro with green trees, be the first to admit it. It's only been the last 3 or 4 years that I've had green trees and started. And it's funny, my wife said to me, she goes, "What are you doing this green tree show for? You don't know anything about green trees." And I said, "Well, it's good, you know." She goes, "You can go in there, you might learn something." So she was very kind to me.
Yeah.
But there's certainly a different species. I've obviously kept carpets for a decade and a bit, but green trees was the first one that I really struggled with. They're very different to carpet pythons, and if you try and keep them the way you keep carpets, you'll run into trouble straight away. So I made all the probably common rookie errors that green tree keepers make in the early days, with humidity and setups, and it's been a good journey. And I can certainly see why they are a class 2 for New South Wales. That you don't just go and buy one and start with that. You really need some reptile experience, and then you need to have a very specialised setup for the green trees.
Yeah. I just wanted to just quickly check, is our stream, for those of you guys watching, please just drop a comment there and tell me if the stream's still running okay. It looks a bit choppy on my reference monitor over here. If it's still good, then we'll just keep going. But so what you're telling me, Brent, is that you wouldn't be able to answer all the questions about what not to do, or because there is a catch. I mean, we were joking about it before, and green tree pythons seem to be sensitive in that first year of life, and depending on if you can get them through that, I mean, that's your trickiest part of their sort of up to the point where they change their color, and so let's because that's a very objective, that's a that can depend on the type of locality when they start changing. So let's put it roughly at about a year of age. If it's well cared for, they suddenly become problem-free animals. I think shed skins are probably the most, shedding their skins, getting proper sheds out of them. That's probably the best indication of whether a green tree python's kept right or not. What would you say, Darren?
Yeah, it's not just ambient humidity; it's hydration. Hydration is the key, for sure.
Yeah, so I mean, I personally think that like if you can get them past that early age, they become bulletproof. Any input, Daniel? What do you think about that? About the age, and what age do you think they become sort of a little bit easier to maintain?
Yeah, definitely that yearling age for sure, and that's probably something I'm grateful for, is starting out with an animal that was a yearling before getting myself something much younger.
Yeah. Tell me something. So so the animals that you start with, this is for all of you. So if you, so what's the best age to start keeping green pythons? Is it best to get them when they're hatchlings? You know, if somebody's brand new to green tree pythons, what would you recommend? Would to start with something that's hatchling? If you had to approach a breeder, what would you be looking for when buying a green tree python?
Myself, I would highly recommend getting yourself a yearling. Those animals will be really well established. They'll be robust and healthy. And you know, most breeders out there like to hold on to their greens, you know, from 6 to 12 months. And I think that's the best way to go, because you're going to get yourself a healthy animal and be problem free.
Yeah, I guess it makes it easier for sexing. So, I mean, things have changed though. I mean, if we can, I think let's go back to, if you guys don't mind, let's just jump back and go back to the early days of green tree pythons, because they used to be a very controversial animal. You know, they seem to be very common these days, and you know, the price has really made them, you know, available to anybody that's sort of above your newbie. You know, like anybody can, let's just put it this way, anybody can buy a green tree python now. It used to be the elite. It was sort of the elite animal for people that had like $10,000 to throw around, you know, to spare 10K to throw around into an animal. And over the last few years, the green tree python breeders really made an effort to breed all the animals that were originally smuggled in, because let's face it, you know, a lot of the lines that are available now, except by the Australian native green, you know, majority of them were introduced into the country in the early days. Darren, you there was give us a bit of a historical overview of green tree pythons. I mean, you were involved with it in the early days. You know, there's horror stories of parks breaking people's doors down to what are they, to seize animals and stuff like that. Do you want to just give us a quick historical overview of the greens in the early days in the hobby, please?
Yeah, initially there was Joe Brettle had when he had his park at Cardwell that Robbie went to run. They bred some, and Joe spread them around and gave them to different people. There was no money change hands in them days. Some went to Graham Gow. There was a fellow called Bob Buckley. I think Bob Withy got some. There was a core group that all sort of knew each other, old timers who had these animals, and at some stage those animals' origins had some sort of cloud over them, and a lot of those were seized, and it was literally parts of wildlife with police knocking on doors, seizing animals. And there was a lot of resultant court action came out of that, and some of those people got their animals back, and when they did, they were actually different animals, and in a couple of cases they were even different locality animals to the ones that got seized. So that was a very controversial time. And then if you skip forward another 10, 15 years, when I bought mine in 2003, again, it was very, everybody who did buy them was concerned that sort of thing could repeat itself. And, you know, Bob Withy had seen my animals, and he said, yeah, they're not snakes, but they're not Australian, Darren. And it sort of got me a bit on edge. And but you know, it's just amazing how far it's come now that, you know, we can even advertise them as whatever locality they are. And they're so well established now. The horse is well and truly bolted, obviously, in that regards. But yeah, mine were very small, probably around 5 or 6 grams, and certainly, you know, a good 6 months of nursing them through and feeding them hydrated prey, making sure they're drinking. And as hatchlings, it's almost impossible to tell when they are opaque. It's a very fast cycle, and you often see the shed there in the morning, and you didn't even realise the animal was in shed. So hydration was key.
Why do you think people ended up with the wrong? So I got stuck right at the start of the conversation. Why did people end up getting snakes back that weren't the same? Is it just because they look so similar, and because parks don't really know the difference? They probably just chucked them all together.
Yeah, they probably did. I know a lot of the animals were held at Taronga Zoo, and whatever happened behind the scenes there at Taronga Zoo, not sure. But, you know, as you said, they were big money then, and wherever there's big money involved, people will do whatever. So, yeah, tumultuous time for sure.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that, you know, it'd be nice to look back. It'd be nice it'd be nice if somebody could write a book about all of this drama in the Australian Rep, because we've got a very colourful.
Somebody wrote one called Smuggled, didn't they?
What's that? What'd you say?
Didn't somebody write one called Smuggled?
Oh, yeah, our friend Victoria. But there is, you know, like it's a fascinating history, and now it's exactly what you say. People are so open to, you know, it's commonplace now to keep a green python. What's the laws like in? Didn't they change the laws a couple of years ago up where you are, Brent? What's the deal with green tree pythons and keeping them in New South Wales now? Are they still don't think about paperwork?
Yeah, New South Wales tried to implement a new law. They would not allow any imports that weren't pure Aussie, and then went further to say you had to prove that it was pure Aussie, which would be virtually impossible. So pretty much they just put a shutdown on anything coming into the state, which caused a bit of a frenzy for a while. Everyone was panicking. There's not enough green trees in New South Wales. Demand went through the roof. Everybody was sort of panicking that would never get any of the good stuff from other states. Daniel's having some camera issues there again.
Yeah.
It reminds me of old Marty Bigar. He used to be the camera dropper forever.
Yeah, that's right.
Are we just on phones?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, they eventually got rid of that. That was in place for a fair amount of time. I think it was about 18 months before I think they realised that, you know, that it's a battle they were never going to win. You know, like Darren said, the horse had bolted a decade before. I mean, you can rock into the. I remember at the Expo 2 or 3 years ago at Castle Hill. One of the guys selling green trees there is a Biax on display, you know, labelled. It's just there's not even an attempt anymore to disguise what's being sold. So they've done a backflip on it now. They are allowing imports. They're still saying they must be, you know, Aussie. You know, we won't allow imports, but that's just paperwork. You know, I'm sure people are importing, you know, mixed bloodlines in, and on the paper there is Aussie green trees. So finally now we're starting to get a bit more coming in. So we'll see how it pans out.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing.
Yeah, and I guess
nowadays, sorry, you go.
No, you go.
I was just going to say it's an interesting thing that Daniel could probably talk to more than myself, in that nowadays it's all about the hunt for the red neonates and what that means. And
yeah, the early days, it was the best way to see if something was smuggled. You know, oh, your snakes had red babies. You know, oh, you better you'll get a knock on the door. You know, it was like very cloak and dagger in the early days. So Daniel, tell us a bit about the legal side of things in South Australia. So what's where are they classified on your license over there? What do you need to have to keep a green tree python in South Australia?
You need to have held a basic license for 12 months, and then you can apply for a specialist permit. Just fill out the paperwork with a couple of endorsements and displaying some knowledge of being able to keep those animals. And it's generally pretty easy to get that through. And in South Australia, it's reasonably relaxed over this side.
So what does an endorsement mean? How does somebody get credibility as somebody that can endorse somebody else?
Yeah.
What do they need to have a license for a certain amount of period of time, or how does that work?
Yeah, so you're supposed to spend time with a couple of green tree keepers and not keepers that are related to the sale. So you can spend some time going over the husbandry, gaining the knowledge from those guys, and then when they're happy, they'll give you a written endorsement to hand in with the permit application.
I guess from all accounts, what I can see is I think the South Australian license system is one of the best put together ones in Australia. Just the
It
way
is
they've
very
added,
good. Yeah.
just the way they've added a free list now. When there's like a minimum one of some. Is it how many? Like, isn't there like your basic license? You can. Are they still got everything licensed, or is there a certain amount of animals that you don't need a license if you're below a certain cap, Darren?
Yeah, there's certain animals that you don't need a license for. Obviously, they've still got to come from a legal source, and you can have one native animal of any kind per person in the household before you need a permit. But if you want to move that animal on, you need to buy a permit to move it on to someone else.
Oh, okay. Very nice. I wish. I think Victoria's license or our Wildlife Act is under revision at the moment. So hopefully they come up with some better way of doing it. But it looks like they just keen to get more enforcement. Harsher penalties and more enforcement. That's how Victoria works. So I don't want to get bogged down in the laws. So just for anybody that's out there, they are in most states they are on a more advanced license. So you can't just get them on your first license. So do be aware of that. And any Australian, the majority of states, any type of native animal needs a license. Certain things are exempt, but the species that are really nice and exciting to keep usually are licensed. So just be aware of it. Don't just buy anything off the back of a truck. So I guess let's. I just wanted to see. There's a few comments there. If anybody's got questions, we'll try and get to. The questions. If you've got anything to say from the people that's watching the show, I think let's start at just basic care. So when you buy your first, your yearling and you bring it home, give us a bit of just an overview of how you do it, Daniel. How would you keep it in that first early stages, and what's the best way, in your opinion, to start them out after you've purchased them?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, if you're acquiring a hatchling, I think the best way to keep those is in a tub rack system. I use 7-litre Systema tubs, just with some heat cord ratted in the back third of those tubs.
Yep.
And those tubs are kept very simple, just some paper towel, water bowl, and I don't know the specific name for it, but it's just like a garden trellis from Bunnings, just for the perching.
Yep.
And yeah, and at a young age, I generally miss them twice a day, the tub and the animals themselves. It's fairly dry over here in SA, particularly through winter. I think that's the best way to keep a young hatchling. It's probably nothing worse when you see someone buy a hatchling and they chuck it in an exoterra, a glass terrarium with the screen top, and all that humidity and heat just escapes through the top, and they go through shedding issues, and health problems arise. And you see it quite often on Facebook. Just bought a new snake and it's not eating, it's not shedding. Don't know what's wrong.
I guess that's a temptation with them, though, because they do display so well that people think that they can stick them into a cage right from the word go. I mean, I did it as well in the early days when I kept greens. The biggest trap to step into is one of these exoterra terrariums, because they just look, how can it not maintain the humidity inside? They display well. You bring them home, you put them in there. They last for a while, and then you start seeing the shedding issues, and they go off their food and stuff like that. And I do agree with you. I think, Brent, you kept them as well on those little. You like those? What are those trails? What are those little things? Those orange, those green. Is it fencing? What do they call? What do they?
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
It's just plastic trellis. Yeah, plastic trellis.
Yeah.
So
just
don't mind
me.
me.
Stick to walls for plants to climb up.
If I look distracted, I'm just going through your photos here because everything's nice and handy there on your Facebook page. So don't mind me. You guys just talk. and then I'll come up with the pictures to sort of show people what we're talking about. So that green mesh seems to work well with most carpet pythons. So how do you feel about I've seen a lot of, I used to keep them over water as well, you know, like in a tub with a little short layer, a shallow layer of water. A lot of guys did that 10 years ago, you know, and I think there's still a lot of chondro keepers that keep them in like polycarbonate tubs inside racks, and then they've got a layer of water in the bottom. Just to keep the humidity up. I don't know if they do that all the way through to adult size, but I think it's a handy way. My biggest thing was always you worry that they're going to drink that water where they defecate in. You know, that's, I think, the biggest issue there. So paper towel on the base. Brent, how did you keep yours when you got them originally?
I did the perfect exact mistake everyone does of the little Exoterra houses that look beautiful. Mesh top, and it's just I should have known better from the start, but worked it out fairly quickly. Luckily, it's what most people do, and it's when you go to buy stuff in pet shops or buy stuff online, that's pretty much all that's available. And there's so much stuff that's just fish tanks that should be used just for fish. They're definitely not for reptiles. And so many people send me pictures of setups, and I just go, it's a fish bowl, throw it in the bin, you know, start again. It's that open mesh top allows all the heat to escape, allows all your humidity to escape. There is no possible way to have them set up and working effectively. And I found that out within the first shed, and when this is a nightmare, and they're not an animal as a hatchie. You want to be sitting in your bathroom underwater and, you know, with gloves on, trying to peel shed off. They're just something that shouldn't be handled excessively at such a young age. So I think I sent you a picture yesterday of those little Exoterra houses. I got some Perspex sheeting cut out to suit the very top, and got a hole cut for the heat lamp to go through. And it was the most instant effective change. It just straight away, the next shed came off in perfect one piece. Obviously, even looking at the temp side of it, looking at how hard the thermometer was working, you know, it's sitting at 70% on mesh. Put the Perspex top on, it dropped down to 20%. So it's instantly, you know, you can just feel the air in there changed straight away. So I think those setups can be used if you've got to seal that top though. You know, you can't have everything escaping out the top.
I guess the problem is with those mesh lids is that the heating devices sitting on top of that mesh lid also works over, you know, it runs way too hot because the heat just goes everywhere. So as soon as the first problem is that there's not enough humidity in the cage. And the second problem is that if you're using, I used to use ceramic heat emitters, and because the heat just escapes everywhere, the thermostat struggles to keep the temperature where it's supposed to be, so that it's running at 60 or 70 degrees Celsius. The ceramic heat it basically bakes out the humidity out of the air around it. And I think that's what caused it. I did exactly the same. I also got that core flute. It's like a plastic core flute that they use to print signs on. And I cut that the same size and stuck that into those mesh lids. And it's like you said, Brent, it solves the problem straight away. You know, it'll take a couple of weeks, but it fixes that humidity loss. Daniel, what were you saying? I interrupted you.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying there's definitely experienced keepers out there that can mod those Exoterra as well and make them work.
Yeah,
I've definitely seen it done successfully, but someone new coming into it, I would highly recommend just a simple type rack setup.
Yeah, the thing with the Exoterras is, somebody who's new to the reptile keeping game, it's their first snake, they see that and they expect it to work off the shelf. As Daniel said, with some modifications, they can be fantastic. So do a foam background on the sides and the back. That fixes your insulation issues because you lose so much heat through glass. It also makes the snake feel more secure because it's closed in on three sides. And as Brent was saying, do something with the top that stops your humidity and your heat going straight out the top, and they can be a great cage. If you look at Luke Van Netheim on Beach of Scaly Beast, look at what he does with Exoterras, you know. Really, really good, but off the shelf, a bit problematic for some reptiles. That's all.
it's all about just airflow, I think, but understanding the thermodynamics in reptile cages takes time and experience. So if you're a newbie and you're new to the whole green tree python thing, you don't have that foundation of experience that you need to get to sort the cage out to where it needs to be. If you've got a bit of idea, then you can, if you've got an idea of how to keep reptiles and understand the basics, then you can keep a green. And as soon as you see the issues, you can adapt to that and make it and fix the problem. A lot of people don't have that background knowledge to fix the issue when it happens. And that, it could take the difference between a healthy green tree python and a sick green python could be 2 weeks, So if you don't pick it up, by the time that shed comes off and it comes off in pieces, there could be deeper lying issues like rehydration, like you've mentioned, Darren, that could be a lot more devastating than a bad shed. So I just brought this photo up here of your hatchling tub, Daniel. I'll just let you talk us through, and I'll point to the things there. So this, you mentioned that you keep them like this in a rack system. So I'm assuming that's just a basic melamine rack.
Yeah,
and you've
exactly.
got these, how big are those Sistema tubs that you've got there?
Those are 7 litre, and they're perfect size for hatchling.
Yeah, and you've just got the little green mesh thing. Does that go the whole length of the
Yeah,
tub?
that goes the whole length of the tub.
Yeah. And then you've got
that way they can choose their perching temperature.
Yeah, they can move up and down. So do you find
they can thermoregulate while they're perching.
So how many strips of heat cable would you be running through the back of? I'm assuming your heat cable runs through the back of that rack.
Yeah.
And how many strands of heat cable do you run in through the back? And at what temperature what's the temperature variation from the front to the back of that tub?
Yeah, I just run 2 lines of heat cord across the back there, and the temperature difference there would be 2-3 degrees.
Yeah, and you've just got holes in the front of the tubs, or have you got holes everywhere through the? Do you just keep the holes in the front of the tubs or in the back of the tubs as well?
Those ones there, I've got a few across the front and some across the sides, and I don't have any across the back.
Yeah. How often would you be missing? How often would you be changing water in those tubs, and how often do you miss them in those tubs?
I generally change the water bowls every 3rd day, and like I was saying before, at that particular young age, I'll do a morning and evening spray, and by the time I do go to do that next spray, it's completely dry. It's important that it's not kept wet and damp 24/7.
Do you spray direct? Because there's a lot of debate these days about hosing your animals down, spraying directly on them or on the sides. I remember seeing little green tree pythons love to drink the water droplets off the sides of tubs and off their bodies, and it's not so much, I think, in my opinion, the water bowl is a good thing to have in there if they wanted to drink water. But I think the water bowl in there really just helps with that overall ambient humidity in the tub. I think a lot of the drinking happens off their bodies, and they're just adapted to that, drinking it off leaves in the wild and stuff like that. So it's important I think the spraying down at least once a day, or I try to spray them down once a day to facilitate that drinking behavior. And they don't just drink. You need to give them a good go before they go, oh, okay, it's drinking time, and they'll start drinking. How do you manage your greens when they were younger, Brent? What did you spray them? How did you handle the humidity in the cages?
Yeah, just a spray bottle, and there certainly is a lot of debate. Some people say they don't need as much spraying as what people give them. I know Andy Shaggy Sinclair said to me, a lot of his adults he rarely sprays at all. He almost treats them like a carpet that maybe going into shed they might get a bit of a spray, but it's, as it's hydration from the inside, not from the outside. It's the bigger problem with the shedding. So really is the spraying doing anything other than just bumping the humidity up externally in the setup. But saying that, I've got the setup now with the water in the big setup, and it sprays 3 times a day, which is probably excessive, 10 or 15 second spray, but It's if anything, it's nice. It's nice to watch. You know, sitting in the lounge room and watching fog and spraying things. It certainly looks the right environment for them.
Darren, is there any other ways that you can improve their hydration? Have you got any thoughts? Like, I know guys inject that. Well, give us some ideas.
Yeah,
of other
yeah.
hydration.
Yeah, so I guess back when I had mine, there was no Pure Taps then, so I used to buy Bigford's pure water. It was pure filtered water, so I would buy that, and that's what the snakes would get, both in the spray bottle and in their water bowls. But also every feed, every pinky would have water injected into it as well. You know, only sometimes half a mil, whatever you could get into it without blowing it up too much. But all that helped. You know, I never ever had any problems with prolapsing or bad sheds or anything like that.
I guess it's fairly easy to see if a green tree python hatchling has got issues, dehydration issues. I remember seeing their
you'll see the wrinkling.
Their back end start to get all puffy like a overinflated sausage, you know, and you can see the wrinkles in the back, and it's never. That's pointing to major issues with kidney failure if you don't address that, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing we need to, I'm sure we'll get to, is feeding regimen. If you feed it like a carpet python, you'll kill it pretty quick as well. So you know that.
We'll get to the feeding. Let's just quickly run through. I noticed that Daniel's got some other photos here. I'm assuming. So up to what point do you keep them in that size rack, Daniel?
Roughly to around about a yearing age. And then from there, I'll transition them to a 20-litre tub.
Okay, I think I've got a photo here of the 20-litre tub. I'm assuming that's the 20-litre tub, yeah?
That one's actually a 60-litre. So I've got a few different sizes at the moment. I'm actually going to be changing it, just having the 7-litre from a hatchling, transition to a 27-litre. And then when they're around that 350, 400 gram mark, get them into an adult enclosure from there.
How have you found the melamine last with the humidity, the humidity that these animals need?
Yeah, really well.
Sorry?
That first hatchling rack you first pulled up, I designed that one with the lids still on them because I was concerned that it would destroy the top of the melamine. But if you're not spraying excessively, it doesn't cause an issue at all. Oh,
okay. I think this could be what size, because it looks like you used many different size tubs.
Yeah.
What size?
That's the 20-litre rack there.
Okay, so this is the upgrade from that first Sistema tub. So you've got a little bit more airspace and a little bit larger. So, what have you found is the perfect? Where do they tend to rest? At what temperature do you think they do the best?
Oh, they're all different. It's hard to say. Like, some of them will be towards the backs, some of them will be towards the front. Each animal just seems to be different and prefers their own temperature.
Depends where they're at with their digestion as well.
Yeah. So I guess it's the same as with all reptiles. You have to provide them with the choice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that a lot of people don't understand that concept of, especially young keepers. You know, there's the whole concept about a hot spot. You know, it's not just about a hot spot that's baking. You know, like that's as hot as hell. You know, there needs to be a gradient towards that hot spot, because they don't necessarily want to sit at a 40-degree and then move over to a 16-degree area in the cage. It needs to be a gentle, and I guess it's harder to do that with animals that are arboreal, you know, because they don't really make contact with a surface that gives you that gentle tapering towards a higher and a lower temperature.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you find that I guess the other thing is, the heat cable might be on the floor in those, you know, it's running on the floor in the melamine, but it's heating up the melamine through the bottom. So these animals are literally sitting. So I'm assuming you make those perches high enough as well, so they can get so they can tuck themselves in nicely underneath where the heating originates from the heating cables as well.
Yeah, I'll have one perch in there slightly higher, and then I'll have one in there lower as well. So I got the option.
Yeah, so they move lengthwise across the from the back to the front, and then along the perch would be stretched along the thermal gradient inside the rack as well. So it's very important to understand that, you know, like so you wouldn't run a perch parallel to where the heat cables are. You'd run them across, you know, you'd run them at a 90-degree angle to the way that the heating works in the okay. So that's
I
a
think
good
it's
tip.
important to talk about the diameter of that perching as well. You know, I often see people with some humongous branches in there for very small green trees. You know, it's they do certainly need something much thinner than what people think.
Yeah. So what's your rule of thumb with a snake with a yearling? How would you know a perch is the right width, Brent?
By body size, I sort of, you know, when they're very young, they're sitting on that trellis, which is tiny. That stuff's maybe 2 mil, 3 mil thick. So they, you know, that's much thinner than what their body is at that point. Obviously, they grow to a point that trellis won't hold them up anymore. They get too big to fit in between the little squares. So, yeah, like finger thickness after that for yearling size. Even the branches that are in that adult stuff would be lucky to be 15 mil round. But I also have 3 different heights and 3 different thicknesses in branches. So, you know, they get options. You know, that's, I guess, the most important thing is they need different temperature areas and slightly different thickness in perches. And I find they use all of them, you know, at different times. They're traveling up and down in the setup, and they'll use, you know, hotter branches, thinner branches. You know, they're all over it. So I think a bit of variety certainly helps. Certainly not too big is the biggest issue, I think.
What do you think, Daniel? How do you gauge thickness of perches with them?
Yeah, when they coil on their perch, you really like to see them draped over. Yeah, if the perch is too big and they can't really coil over that perch nicely, it should be the coil should be touching underneath, like really nicely draped over.
Yeah, they actually wrap around the perch rather than drape over it. And as Daniel said, if their coils are touching at the bottom, if you look from underneath, you can't see any perch, you've got the right size perch.
So it's like putting your hand around a shovel handle as well. You know, if your fingers touch, you know you've got a good secure grip on it. So it's the same with them. You know, it's like that's a silly comparison, but it's it works.
Well, if you think about the natural history of the animal, it's perching most of the time during the day before it comes down to hunt, and it needs to be able to be secure on that branch when wind comes through and what have you. So, yeah.
So there's a good picture here about how you've done your routing of your heat cable through the back. So it's basically just a loop that comes in the one side and does a couple of coils and then goes back out the back end. And here you can see as well the perches that little perches. What are these little white things on the side? Where do you find those for those out there that want to suspend branches like that? Where do you find those little white plastic bits on the edges there, Daniel?
Yeah, so Mick Hepworth from MH Reptiles and Enclosures, I don't know where he gets them from, but he's got hundreds of them.
Yeah, I'll tell you what they are. They're brackets from fit outs of built-in wardrobes.
Okay. Well, they
just work perfectly.
And if you can get. What do you prefer? A wooden branch, or I know a lot of guys swear by PVC. I mean, it's longer wearing and stuff. But I mean that those little wooden rods they're easy enough to just replace. What do you prefer, wooden or plastic branches?
Yeah, I'd probably prefer some textured PVC ones in there. Just with if you're spraying in there, you just got to be careful that you're not doing it too excessively and you getting any mold build up on any wooden perches.
Yeah, I mean, but it's cheap enough to just bin them and get a new set as soon as you see any mold on there. But then, I mean, that's common sense, and not many people have common sense these days, do they? Sorry, it's just me just being smart ass. So, can you hear me all right? So it's just very quiet there. Nobody's. I
Have you
thought
got
a
many
lot going on.
questions coming up?
Let me see. Somebody said how we are running heat cords through the inside of the perch. I guess that's moving into what we're discussing next. Is like after they heat that, get out of that yearling 2-year age, then we start moving into proper enclosures. And now we'll. I think this is the size. This is the big size. Do you keep them? What's this? I'll bring this picture up. So, at what age do you move them in this size rack, Daniel?
They're about 3 years of age in there.
And do
That's
you
a
keep them
90
in?
litre rack.
Yeah. What thermostats do you like to run there? Is that a microclimate?
Yeah, it's an Evo Light. I was using the iStats previously.
Yeah.
But then when they stopped making them, I sold them with my carpets and whatnot. And I just like to have it uniform.
I like everything needs to be symmetrical around me as well when I've got a snake room. I just can't do bits and pieces of all different things. Like Brent with that background of his there, it's like it has to be all the same or nothing, So I've heard good reports on. So I think it looks to me like the tubs just the tub sizes get bigger, but the layout still stays the same all through their age and growth. So it's just a bigger version of what you've done when they were smaller, and I guess that gives them they relaxed in those environments as well, because you're not changing it. You're not going nuts with branches and leaves and stuff. They learn what to expect from their environment from a young age, and it stays the same all through till they're adult. When do you take them? When do you move them into cage? Do you keep chondros in? Sorry, I still refer to them as chondros. So I hope nobody.
So do I. It's all right.
Just sounds so much better than what they're called now. I don't fall into the mainstream and that type of stuff, So when do you ever move them into display cages, or do you prefer the plastic?
Yeah, I do. I've got a couple 4-foot enclosures made up, but I'm just in the process of getting a wall of 900 by 600 enclosures made up, and in the future I won't be using that large rack that you just showed there. Just from a 27 ladder rack, when they're around about 350, 400 grams, I'll get them straight to an enclosure.
Yeah, I mean. That is the ideal snake for display purposes. They are. I mean, you could just stare at them the whole day, and it's like watching a fish tank. Nothing happens really in there, but they just look so pretty when there's other green things around them.
Just I don't know if you want to go back to that question about running heat through a perch. I guess the dynamics of that is such that the animal wants to perch, but if we're forcing it to perch on a perch which has a heat cable through it, then there's more than double the onus on you to make sure that that's running at the right temperature. So I wouldn't think that would be a good way to go. Manage your range of temperatures in your tub from front to back, and let the animal choose where it wants to go.
Yeah, and I guess we'll have a look at this display here and let you run us through this as well, because that's a really good basic setup that you've got there. So talk us through that cage. What type of heating have you got there? I see you've got the probe there. Why do you keep the probe where you keep the probe? Just give us a general rundown of your cage setup there, please, Daniel.
Yeah, no worries. So the heating I've opted for with these guys is the heat panels. They're Helix heat panels, and generally with heat panels, you want the probe sitting right next to the basking area. If you have it in the middle of the cage, what some guys would do with other species, those heat panels can get really hot. But if you keep it near the basking area, they don't run too hot at all. They won't burn your animals or anything like that. And it just gives a nice heat for the greens. And I've just got 2 perches, one just below the basking area, one down lower if they need to get out of the heat. It's a large water bowl down the bottom. I've got the Arcadia lighting in that one. I would have preferred to go the smaller length, the 30 centimeter. They give off a little bit more heat than what I would like.
Yep.
But I generally like to keep it simple. I like the look of the universal rock backgrounds, with some couple of fake plants in there.
Yeah.
It's nice to look at. It's simple, easy to clean, and I really like to have the perches removable. I don't like to remove the snakes off the perch. It's just much easier to pull those out if you need to give it a deep clean.
Is that that's the cheap bamboo from Bunnings, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, the bamboo flares with the flare cut off.
Yeah. I used to use that stuff as well. It's perfect. I was going to say something. So, what do you provide UV light? Is that an Arcadia UV globe, or I know that
it's a very
really
low
high
percentage.
But is that 5%?
It's the shade dweller.
Ah, okay, yeah. Do you find that they like to bask under the UV light?
I do see them come out of it, and they can quite easily get out of it under that heat panel and underneath the plants that are over the perches there as well.
And how many hours of daytime do you give them, considering that you're in South Australia? What do you do with your daylight hours?
I just run normal daylight hours, 10, 12 hours.
Let me just see, because I've got Brent sent me some photos here of why I can't get out of there now. It's right. There we go. For some reason, some of the stuff didn't update on that screen. I just want to switch profiles here and just go to my other profile. Brent may send me some photos. So, Brent, give us just a rundown. So, you used to keep them in the Exotheras. We've already discussed the drama. And then last year we started chatting. Was it last year that we started putting our heads together to come up with an idea on how to build a cage for adult green tree pythons? What did you? How did you set up your cage? Let me just pull up these pictures. I just you talk. I just want to find the photos.
Yeah, obviously at some point they outgrow those smaller things. Everything needs to get into an adult setup, at some point. And my biggest concern was something that's obviously going to handle the humidity. If you're going to have something that's got water and foggers and things in it with a constant high humidity, your average melamine stuff's going to fall apart. That stuff is it's like a PVC type melamine. That's, I wouldn't say waterproof, very water resistant. And with 3-sided background, and sides, all as one piece that slides in there. It's anything that sprays in there basically hits that and runs to the bottom anyway. And we came up with that idea between us that you could have a drainage system built into it. That I've actually got a stainless steel plate in the bottom of that setup. I probably should have sent you some pictures of that. It's basically a pressed bit of stainless steel with a drain hole in it. That if it gets too excessive in the water there, it actually runs out a bit of 5/8 heater hose down into a bucket underneath. So the water's basically not getting trapped and sitting, to damage the enclosure, but you don't just constantly have that wet feel. There's no point having your substrate sitting on the floor wet all the time. It's not healthy. It's I find the green trees spend more time than I thought sitting on the ground. I never really thought, being a burrower, you just think they're going to be up all the time. But even from a young age, I found quite often they would go to ground, and I was concerned at first. I thought that's odd. I don't know why they continually go to ground and then they're back up. It's thermoregulating. I think at times they're chasing humidity as well. I've got that critter crumble stuff on the floor, mixed in with some other stuff, and I guess if they want to get down and nestle into that, they can find humidity down in there when they need to. So
you keep talking. I'm just there's hundreds of photos to go through here, but I'm going to find those photos of the original setup, because I've
So Brent, have you?
Yep.
So do you have a drainage layer? Have you set that up like the bioactive guys do, with a drainage layer and then some mesh and then your substrate on top of that?
Pretty much my where the drain hole is, I've just got a piece of mesh over that center hole, and then I put the substrate straight on top of that. So that's basically they can get to that metal drain part if they want to dig down to it. But it's basically just to keep that water out from sitting in the bottom of that enclosure forever. So, and I still run a water bowl above that, so it sits up on top of all of that. So it's still access to a normal water bowl, but yeah, it's just that issue I thought of. If you're going to have water sprayers, water sitting in the bottom of anything PVC or melamine, even that PVC I've got is already showing signs of wear at the front. Occasionally the greens will push their little triggers, the water sprayers, and they turn them around so that they hit the glass and it runs down the front. So, you're constantly adjusting things, but even down on the front very lip there, I've noticed on the edging that has started to lift and bubble a little bit just from being wet, so often. So it's a tough thing what to build, your adult setups out of. I certainly think that PVC is the best. It'd be nice to have something all glass, but we know glass is the most ineffective, for heat wise out of anything. So it's as much as it looks pretty, it needs to be made to suit the animal, not to, what makes us feel nice looking at them.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and what do you use for heating? I mean, that's you've got a lot of heating happening as well. Your thermostat as well that you're using, and your overall your spraying. I think it's a really well put together system you've got there.
Yeah, we talked a lot about that heating, trying to get that setup of options for heating and getting that gentle sort of heat in different areas without, on a tall setup, you just don't want to be frying things to try and get heat right through the setup. So we came up with, we actually run 4 heat lamps at the top of that setup. What's the name of the lamps that we use? That they're not a ceramic heater.
It's the EcoTech Radiant. The EcoTech Radiant, similar to
Spiral Pro.
Radiant, I don't know.
You can see them light up. Like you can actually see when they temp. You see the orange glow inside them, pumping out the heat.
EcoTech Spiral Pro.
They're different feeling of heat. They feel under your hand. They feel different to what a ceramic heater output wise. And we basically set up so that there's 2. I think we use 275 watts at the front and 250 watts at the back. So it basically gives you a variance front to back as well. So they again, it's choice. If they want to be closer to heat, they can go to the branch, under the 75s. If not, they can go back to the 50s. So I found that most effective.
The wavelength of heat that they put out is, they call them deep heat emitters, I think is what they call them, and it's supposed to be as close as possible to the way the sun warms things up. So it actually warms their body, not just their skin. Yeah.
It definitely feels different, and you can notice it on the thermostat when it kicks in and it's on pulsing. So you'll see the thing, glow for a little while and then back off. You put your hand under it. It's such a gentle heat. It's not, like when a ceramic emitter, when that thing lights up, it really throws out some burning hot air off the thing, where these things is just, that radiant heat is very, very different feel to it. So it seems effective, and it's worked very well so far. And I've got to say that thing's been running for 18 months now and problem free. There's been no issues at all with the with the setup with that heating in it.
So do you have like a false top with these globes in it, or are they individually caged? How do you stop the animals getting near them?
We used I think it's an exo cage as well. It's a big tube it's got its own mesh built into the bottom of the unit, and the globe sits up inside that. So I cut 4 holes in the top of the enclosure, and I built some brackets up on top so that they only just poke through maybe 20 mil through the actual top of the enclosure itself. So the animal can get up on that top perch and still be maybe 15 centimeters away from the bottom of the mesh. So it seems the probe for the thermostat hangs off that top branch, so they're never in danger of getting too hot.
You just bear with me. We've got unfortunately Brent and I speak lots, and we send lots of pictures to each other. So I will find
out those photos,
because it's a very interesting setup that we've used. But I need to just work through all these pictures now and see. how far ago that was. I can't remember. Oh, here we go. So I'll just forward myself these photos again because I sorry guys, you guys sorry, this is going to be.
So does anyone know where these heat lamps that people are using, where are people getting those heat panels from? I often get asked people, because I have the heat cords that I sell, and people often message me chasing those heat panel sort of setup. So what are you using, Daniel? Where do you get yours from?
My first couple I originally got from website Exotic Planet, and he brought in Helix heat panels, but no longer able to get those anymore. I believe that Habitat are about to ramp up production on their panels again, so hopefully not too far off we see those becoming available again.
Yep. Yeah, they seem effective. I mean, it's just that different style of heating, I guess. You know, it's a bit more widespread sort of heat, and sometimes I think the ceramic heaters tend to be very concentrated in one spot. So it's hard to get, especially when you're talking about an adult. You need like a wider spread area of heat rather than a very focused area. Much like the way with laces, it's a very common problem of people using one heat lamp on an adult and getting burns on the back of on monitors. It's a very common problem, and the same issue. You know, if you've got 3 or 4 heat lamps spread out down the length of the body of the animal, it gives them a far even and more gentle heat and low risk of burn. I guess you've got the same problem with green trees, that you don't. Those heat panels seem to be more effective for creating a wider area of heat that they can be comfortable in.
Yeah.
I've got those photos. I'm just forwarding them all. Sorry, guys, this is very unprofessional of mine to do this. But I just wanted to make sure that we cover everything that needs to be covered. Here we go. Yeah, we've got some nice photos here.
What about the fogger setup? Like, I use that XO fogger system. Do you guys use anything for the fog? You know, I've got to say, honestly, mine's it certainly creates some humidity in the air. Looks pretty. That's really the only reason I put it in there. It looks beautiful to see the thing pump and fill the thing with fog, and looks fantastic. Lasts for 30 seconds and it's gone. But I'm not sure how effective they are for creating, humidity that's long lasting. Certainly not going to change the animal's internals for humidity by anything. But yeah, there's a little vid from the stream of fog that it pumps on through. So you guys using anything at all with fog?
No, I'm not. I'm just using the spray bottle.
Yep.
Give it a good mist. The sides of the tubs, the animal, and that humidity will usually peak high 80s, early 90%, and generally 12 hours, 24 hours, it's completely dried out, ready for a spray.
Yeah, there's certainly. I mean, there's some fancy stuff if you want to go crazy and build some wild setups. There's certainly plenty of companies make things that a spray bottle can certainly do the job of most of it. It's a lot of that setup I've got is it's the automation factor that it just happens. Like there's a timer system set up on the sprayer that you can program it to however many times a day and for how long you want those to spray. It just ensures that it does happen. I have lots of animals, so if I miss 3 or 4 days of spraying something, I want it just automated, so it just happens, and it's just something I don't have to worry about.
So I came through as usual. Hang on. And I had to look through a lot of photos on that.
You went deep. That's that would have been about 3,000 photos ago, I reckon, from a couple of years back.
Yeah. So what did you do with the base here? So that you've got your cage sitting on these little legs. So what did you make those legs out of?
The legs were just table legs cut down and stuck under to make them sort of the right height where I wanted it to sit, and I needed it space underneath for that drainage setup that we talked about. That I couldn't really just have a cupboard or have it sitting flat on something that's got that drain plate. I'm not sure if you found the photos that Stano drain system, but.
So this is let me just see. I don't want to go to the wrong. So that was the drain that you installed.
Yep.
So they installed the drain. What did they seal the corners? Did they weld that together, or how did they seal the edges of the?
That plate just lifts straight up and out, so it's got a slight taper, or it's got a fold, so it's hard to see there, but it's got a fold right down to that center hole, so that anything that lands on it runs down into that pipe. So that right in the center of that, there's a little tube that pokes through the bottom.
Okay.
Probably easy to see there. You can see the center hole. It just runs out to a pipe at the bottom. So once the background's in there, any water that hit everywhere, because that background, it basically overlaps the edge by 40 or 50 mil. So that went then around and sealed with just silicone right around the edges of the background to the plate anyway. So I can cut it out if it needs to, but it's not something you should really ever need to pull apart again. So pretty much that water, anything that gets too excessive in there can run out if it needs to.
Yeah, and this is just showing people the parts that you use. So this was your the misking that you installed into the. So I'm assuming that pump just goes into the tubing, just goes into a water reservoir, and then that administers your water spray all through your enclosure.
Yep. Yeah. Very, very basic setup. You obviously, they tell you many times in the instructions, make sure your water reservoir is up high, well above where your pump is. And everyone tries to cheat it like I did and keep them level, or they certainly won't suck uphill. So it needs gravity feed to the pump, and then you set it's basically like a little a thermostat screen. You basically set up all your timing wise for what you want to spray and whatnot.
Yeah, so I just wanted to also mention that we are this show is sponsored by Zoomed Australia, so we just give them a little plug there with one of their products. So that is the hygrotherm. And what have you got? How have you got the hygrotherm connected into your cage, mate? So hygrotherm can handle water, humidity, and temperature, but you've connected
it can.
Yeah,
it can do it all. I still use a thermostat for the heating separate to that setup. I've got an iStat setup on there that runs the heat lamps separately to that. That one you can have set up just for the humidity. So I can basically get the sprayers or the fog system to kick in if the humidity drops below 30% or 40%, whatever you set it at. So that's those little heat light lamps, how they come through top to bottom.
So you've installed that. So you've got so the roof is recessed, so you can see, so you can't see any of the dome sitting on top. So if you're facing the cage, you can't see all of this going on at the top. Now those are just I think Tim down in South Australia sells those hoods, those light dome things that you've got up at the top there. And just inside
ERS ones.
Just inside them, you've got the Spiral Pro. So this is the thing that heats them up nicely, and it's a nice gentle heat when you've got them connected to a dimming thermostat. I mean, you have to, dimming thermostat all the way. I don't like using on-off thermostats when it comes to green tree pythons. So no, that's interesting. So this is that was a basic setup for, well, not a basic setup, but I mean that's how you would do a adult green tree python. And just give us this was your early days. I mean, tell us what's going on here.
Yep, that's in the exos or any of those sort of fishbowl setups that I hate so much. Cherie really wanted them displayed. They were in her bedroom at that point. She wanted them to look pretty. Having them in plastic tubs would have been far more effective. Having them, better set up for the animal, but having them on display, there's those mesh tops on that. I had little perspex panels cut out. I think there's another picture. The next picture along shows with the light section off just the perspex panel cut directly to fit to cover that entire mesh on top, and then have the exact size hole cut out in that perspex for that heat lamp to drop in. And they were just ceramic heat emitters that I was using on that setup, and that fixed everything.
So in this gap here, I'll just use my mouse here. So in this little gap on top of the hood, there's a piece of, you can't see it on those photos, but there's a little edge right there where this light domes fit in.
Yeah, there was another picture I sent you. I think it showed just the perspex of the panel by itself without the light on. So it's just a big square, basically, tailor made to fit right on top of there and seal it all in.
Yeah. I didn't get all the photos. I tried to, but under the pressure that I was feeling then, you know, I tried to perform as well as I could, you know. So sorry about that. So okay, so we moved them into the big cages. Now let's quickly we touch on some food. We've gone for it's been an hour, so I just wanted to let me just say again, thank you. I just wanted to say thank ZoomEd Australia for supporting our show. Without them, we couldn't be doing these shows on a regular basis. And yeah, check them out if there's anything, especially those hygro stats that we use. I think it's called the hygro stat. Hygrotherm. Check those hygrotherms out if you need something that can control humidity and temperature on your cage. So let's touch on feeding. So what's your favorite food to throw at your hatchling green tree pythons, Daniel?
I start with pinky mice, very small.
And have you found them problematic to take pinkies, or is there any special techniques? I mean, I found that if it's a hatchling if the hatchling gets started really well and it's, you know, it comes out of a nice looking egg, you know, I never found them to be too crazy hard to get going. Do you find that they take hatchling or pinky rats without a drama, or are they
Yeah,
sometimes?
I mean, I'm yet to experience establishing from the egg, but back in 2018, I acquired five week-old greens, which was far too early. They weren't established feeders. Traded those guys in, and they were just runners. They were really hard to get feeding, and I tried every trick, jerky movements, chip down, all sorts. And I was just going over YouTube looking for tips, and I noticed a guy, he was feeding pinky heads. So I just sliced the heads off frozen, thaw those out, and just pop them in their mouth, and they'll lodge in their teeth.
Yeah.
They can't spit them out, so they had no choice but to swallow those down. And I did that maybe 2 or 3 times, and something just switched, and they were bang, straight on the feed week after week. There's definitely lots of little tricks. It's just comes down to trying different things and finding what works for you.
Yeah. Any tips from you? Can you hear me?
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. So when I had my babies in 2005, I was lucky. Out of the clutch, 2/3 of them went straight onto pinkies, but I did have a few that I used chick down, and I'd just stick a bit of chick down to the nose with a pinky, and that did the trick. It's similar with lots of species, I guess. You got to keep trying different things and switching it up, because ultimately you want to try and avoid any form of assist feeding if possible. But with some of them, it just comes down to doing that for the snake to survive. So.
That I do love the way that they have those smeary poos when they start going on to pinky rats, you know. And they seem to find a way to spread that feces all over the sides of the tubs, and you know it's a bit messy in the early. It seems to clear up as soon as they start taking food that's got hairs on them. Eventually, Brent, any tips from you to getting them feeding, or did yours just go straight up?
No, I've never bred them, so you know I've basically received animals that were feeding very well. So fortunate that just keep feeding. And I think, like Darren said before, it's important not to feed them like a carpet, and you can cause the animal issues power feeding it. They're really not a species that is going to take pushing 2 or 3 feeds into a week and large size feeds, and really pointless. I really don't think you're ever going to be able to pump them and breed them at 18 months old. It really seems like there's something that needs to grow slowly. Everyone I spoke to about breeding wise said, don't rush it, wait till they're 3.5, 4.5 years old before you worry about trying to, introduce males. So I was really very slow. It's probably the slowest animals I've ever grown in my life. I like to feed stuff. I like the calves to grow, and they really respond well and grow very fast with some aggressive feeding, twice a week. But the green trees, they sort of sat on fortnightly feeds and grew very slowly. You want that food to make a lump in them so it's noticeable, but I certainly don't think they're a species you want. Occasionally in carpets, I'll feed something that's what I would say a big feed that leaves them very, a good, very big lump in them. I certainly don't like to see that with the greens. They're just not a species that seems to want to be pushed.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
they are
I had a bit of
notorious. So go, Darren.
I had a bit of a formula. So I would not feed more than 2 feeds between each defecation. And so for juveniles, that's more frequent. For adults, that can be 6 weeks between defecation. So no more than 2 feeds in between each one.
And they're notorious for hanging on to their feces as well. It's like they just want to, they don't want to go to the toilet. It's just like they can sit with that, they hang their tails and it's hanging on the ground and you can see there's something in there and they just refuse to let it go. I mean, we've seen how many instances of prolapse and stuff, although they can still do that and not prolapse. I think the prolapsing was it's more a dehydration thing, prolapsing, than the whole I don't want to go to the toilet yet. But it's exactly what you said. You have to monitor defecation and sort of adjust your feeding to adapt to so they don't get too far behind on their defecation schedule.
Are you guys seeing anything much these days in prolapse? Like for most I've seen, I've never had the pleasure of it, and from what I've heard, it's not as common as people talk about. It used to be a bit of a thing around green trees that it was an issue, but I don't know if it's different lines or the way people are keeping them, but it doesn't seem to be as big a problem these days.
Yeah, Daniel can talk to that.
I've experienced it once. The animals that I acquired, they were 5 weeks old. I freighted them in from Sydney. Got them home, unboxed them. They did have they looked rather dehydrated, and I set them up in their tubs. And then the next day I woke up, 3 of them had prolapsed.
Oh, wow.
And these greens weren't even 10 grams. So it was a difficult situation to deal with. Oh, very small.
Nightmare.
Yeah.
Did you? So what did you? If you're in a situation like that, I mean, that's always, we can talk about husbandry and stuff, but this is a real important aspect of them. How did you treat it? What did you do when you saw that happen?
My rodent breeder, he lives nearby, and he's quite experienced in these type of things. So I gave him a call straight away, and I took them over there, and we used a ballpoint probe and some KY jelly, and just very gently inserted it back in, very carefully. Luckily, it didn't take too long.
Shrink it down with the sugar paste.
I tried that. I didn't seem to get great results with that.
They were particularly bad prolapses, though, weren't they?
Yeah, they were quite large. Those prolapses were corrected, and I let them go several weeks before feeding anything.
Yeah.
And offered them the smallest feeds I could give them, and they went alright for a little bit. They'd have a couple of feeds, and they would defecate, but it became a recurring issue, and slowly those 3 faded away and didn't make it. And I think that I think because they were so young, I could see they were quite dehydrated. They weren't in the greatest shape. I think ultimately it was a bit of a death sentence for them. If the animal's healthy, if you have an animal that's healthy that prolapses, you've got a much higher chance for those guys to get back on track.
And I've heard of people putting a stitch in things even, to try and hold it together for time to let it heal up by itself. You've never had to go to that resort?
No, I didn't. and usually some guys will put some tape over the vent as well.
Yeah.
And I've just been recently looking into it further just so I can better prepare myself in the future, because anyone that keeps a reasonable amount of greens will experience it at some stage. So yeah, I will be taking that step to get it taped up, and then also removing the perch for a couple of days.
Yeah.
And then yeah, hopefully I'll be much better prepared next time around.
But prolapsing is not limited to just hatchlings, though. I mean, I've seen that happen to all age green pythons. We had a friend of mine in Victoria had a adult female prolapse once, and she was like a real yellow, beautiful snake. But she was also always hanging her tail as well. And then the one day she just prolapsed. He took her down to Shane Simpson, and he put that stitch over the cloaca to keep it in, and he stopped feeding it. But it's what Darren said. I think people they feed too much. And this guy was also notorious for feeding green tree pythons big meals and often. When something like that happens, you have to take a step back and go, okay. In your case, Daniel, you got them and they're half stuffed. I mean, you don't know what the breed, and that sounds like it was something that came before your time that caused that issue. If an adult snake in your care does that, and you've had it, it's been in your care for the majority of its life, then you have to take a step back and go, well, how do we fix this? And I remember that he stopped feeding that snake for a couple of months, because they can go like any other snake for a while without food, especially if they've got the fat reserves inside them. And he started feeding it small meals, and it was fine, didn't prolapse. And then he started going back straight onto his routine that he used to follow, and she prolapsed again. And once they start prolapsing, if you don't look after it, they keep prolapsing, and it just gets worse and worse and worse until they just end. You find them dead upside down. It's like they can't really recover from that. It's like when when guys started keeping the green pythons in the early days, and they would regurgitate their food, and they'd seem to get better. And then a few months later, they would just find them upside down in their cages. But what they figured out was they got a test done on their lungs. What the snakes do is they regurgitate, and then they would breathe some of that acid that comes out with it, and it would cause a bacterial infection through their system. They'd get better, they'd start eating again, but that bacteria will cause issues later down the line. So it's something that it really is important to avoid that stuff at all costs. And if it means growing them slower and feeding them less, is a far better strategy to avoid the drama than having that in the first place.
And particularly when they're adults. If you're feeding adults too often, you find they won't be active. They'll just sit on that perch day in, day out. And you'll feed them again, and they'll just keep doing it.
Yeah, so that's the third thing in the equation. You've got hydration, feeding schedule, and then activity. And I think that's where a lot of us, in captivity, that falls down. So one thing I want to talk about, again, let's look at the natural history of the animal. I think they also need some vertical branches in their enclosures. When you look at how they come down from the trees on a single bough of a tree down to their hunt in their ambush position, and then they go back up again, that takes a fair bit of muscle work and a bit of exercise. They're not getting that in captivity.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what you saw, Brent.
That's what leads to the tail hanging that you're talking about, with their tail hanging or bloated. It's lack of activity.
Yeah, but Brent, you saw them, their behavior totally changed in that big cage of yours once I mean, remember when you put them in there at first, they weren't sure. They were like, what the hell is this? But you'd be noticing a whole bunch of new activities since they're in the bigger, larger, higher cage.
Yeah, definitely. I remember when we first spoke, I put them in there. There wasn't a lot of foliage in there. It was a little bit bare, and they were definitely freaked out. One of them went to ground and stayed on the ground for about 4 days. I was really worried. It was obviously freaked out of the change. It's a very, very big change in environment. So adding some more fake plants and vines and things in there to create some cover, fix that. And now, like I said before, they use all 3 perches. Their ground, they're on 3 perches. There's a couple of ledges up the back. They're all over the place, which I think is that's the point, that they're happy that they can go to where they want in the cage comfortably. They can get the heat from the areas they want, and they're always on the move. It's like I think they're just sitting in the one spot all the time in the heat. It's too cold. They want more if they're away from it, possibly too hot. But if they've got variety and they've got some things in there to stimulate movement, then it makes them a much healthier animal.
Yeah. So there's the triangle. So that's something that we should get a shirt made up of, like we did last time. Get a shirt done with a triangle on it, and we could say it's heat, hydration, activity, and what was the third one?
Diet.
To keep a green tree python healthy. Like I could come up with a shirt like that. I can do that. But it's important, and there's so many people that you get one of them wrong, and the other 2 come crashing down. It's the basics of green tree python, especially green tree python, but most reptiles. But most people think that reptiles are tough and they desert living and they don't need lots of water and stuff. But those animals find the water and they find the areas they'll dig holes and be there where it's more, where the air is more hydrated. They'll find it.
Yeah, they've evolved over millions of years to do that in their habitat.
Yeah. So you might look at them running around in the desert, to just use a silly example like bearded dragons. People go, oh, no, they can handle dry, But in the meantime, those animals live in burrow. They go down burrows. They'll be there where they breathe the humidity. Now, our understanding of these things, what we've seen with chameleons, there's a guy that does a lot of work with chameleons in Tanzania. And what he's seen there is those chameleons would literally sit at night and they would breathe. Their lungs are adapted to breathe the thick mist that comes in at nighttime. They breathe the mist and they literally absorb some of that liquid through their gas exchange through their lungs. And that's how they stay hydrated. In the day, there's rain. They don't like the spray, but they basically drink through their breathing. And I wouldn't be surprised if green tree pythons have adapted a similar strategy to absorb, to not have to have puddles of water around. All these animals that are forest dwelling or that live in high humidity environments, they would have an ability to absorb water without drinking water. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I could just be making up shit now, but in my mind, that would be the perfect adaptation for animals that live in that type of environment. So I don't know how you feel about it. I'm just rambling now. Crazy,
Probably right. I mean, the most dangerous place for the green tree in the forest to come down to get a drink for, that's they're most vulnerable when they're down on the ground to other predators. So, them up in the treetops is the place they want to be.
And that's still some place where I'd like to go is Iron Range, but I don't think I'd survive the trip. I'm too soft. I'd probably melt,
The humidity.
It's a harsh environment. Have you been up to Iron Range, Darren?
No, we are heading up to Cairns later this year, so we'll see how far up we get. But Matt Somerville just got from a trip up there, and some of the pictures he put on Instagram, found quite a few green pythons this time, all down about a foot or so off the ground in their ambush position.
And it's from seeing photos like that from these guys that are crazy enough to go. I mean, I've experienced Cairns. It's enough. I don't want to do that, So if you want to go even where it's worse, go up to, it's beautiful seeing those things, but it's good getting those inside images of where they find these animals sitting next to the road, and it gives you weight with your opinion, weight with what you're saying about them moving upwards and downwards. Most of the photos that I've seen of wild greens have been close to the ground.
Yep.
Either on the ground.
But they're back up into the treetops before the daylight.
Yeah. So it's and we wouldn't have this insight into these animals if it wasn't for the brave souls that would go into the treacherous journeys up into these godforsaken areas. So it teaches us mongrels down south how to look after them properly. So, but that's all. You need to take those things into consideration when you're keeping these animals. You can't just be open. Read the complete Conroe book, and you think, this is the way to do it. Because even the information that was sort of the Bible for green tree python keepers at one stage. Everybody was going complete Conroe. Complete Conroe was the book, and it was a good book. But from what we're seeing now, and there's a lot more people keeping them now, and they seem to have gone a bit more mainstream now as well. So you've got the intrepid souls that go out and take the photos of them, and it's totally not what our understanding was. It's like Dan Natush. I love following him on Instagram with the photos that he posts about his trips up Indonesia. And it's, you look at whether you have your idea from reading these green tree python books, and then you see the guys, you see the images that the guys are getting back from their journeys in their natural range, and it's completely different to what our idea was of how to keep these snakes.
I definitely think if you get the opportunity to actually go and stand in the animal's natural habitat, feel the humidity, feel the temperature, I think it better informs your keeping.
Yeah. I think it's the same for most species. It's like a simple but yet effective example as well. You've got the beardy vet, Jonathan Howard and he's doing studies on bearded dragons, and the stuff that he's finding out about beardies is completely the opposite of what our original understanding was of how bearded dragons live in the wild. And
is that at the lizard lab at Macquarie Uni? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, no, Jonathan Howard's he's a vet up in Sydney, but it's because social media and there's so much more information now from people. We can see this stuff because people have got their phones in the range, and they're taking photos of exactly, and they're showing the world what they're seeing in their natural environment. Where this wasn't around 5 or 10 years ago. It wasn't so easy to share information like it is now.
No, that's it, and spot on. So, you touched on complete Conroe. Information like this today. So, when I was getting ready to breed mine, I had many late night phone calls with Greg Maxwell. He mentored me and coached me a lot through that whole process. And, that sort of stuff's not necessary now with the information that's out there if you're willing to go and look for it.
And if you listen to the right opinions and not just everybody's opinions, I think that's one of the biggest things. I said to somebody last week, I said to them, don't listen to everybody's opinion. You find the people that are the qualified voices in that field, and you could see from how other people respond to them commenting on things, and you trust what they're saying. But you still need to, don't just believe in one guy. But fortunately there's a lot of guys that are 10 years on. There are more people now that are experts than there were 10 years ago. So it's about finding the guys that, especially in Australia, there's a few really good guys now. Like, I'm a little bit out of touch with the green tree industry in Australia, but it seems like it's moving at a steady pace, and there's a lot more animals now, a lot more designer snakes. I know, Daniel, you've got some nice canaries, that you work with, and and it's something, or coffee owl. I think it's coffee owl. But it's good to see that type of stuff still being around and being looked after properly, and it gives that industry momentum in Australia, and it generates new experts with captive bred animals. I'm just glad we're at a point now where there's not that much smuggling happening with the green pythons, and it's a more of a focus now on captive breeding. I saw a guy the other week post that he's had 15 clutches. I'm sure you saw the post about the recessive nature of yellow neonates or yellow hatchlings. That it's a recessive trait. I'm watching to see how that develops. I think 15 clutches is a fairly decent, it's a decent sample size to figure something, but that's not been known before. I've never seen somebody postulate. I've never seen somebody actually saying, look, they think yellow hatchlings are recessive. It's a recessive trait because parents that were yellow have full clutches that were yellow. You know, I thought that was very interesting, actually. There's a question here from Leah asking about transport with green tree pythons. And I think when attending a vet visit regarding transport, what is recommended for a GTP to keep them on? Do you keep them on a perch, or how do you transport green tree pythons? What's the best way to ship them? Daniel.
Yeah, I've had a few different methods from going to the airport, picking them up. Russell Grant, I've had him, he knocks up these actual wooden boxes, and he's got a plastic tub in there stuck to the bottom with some crumpled paper towel.
Yeah.
And his lid on top, air holes. And I've also had just small tubs with that Bunnings fencing trellis zip tied to the bottom so I can't move, so that snake can just securely be on the perch. Yeah. Air holes and then boxed up from there.
I guess
mine came in the little rice.
Yeah, I guess if you don't
The
shake
little
the
rice
box,
containers.
yeah, I guess if they won't, they're pretty tough. They hold on quite well on those. I mean, they perch in the trees, you know, so you'd have to really shake them to loosen them from there. How did you when you bought yours, Brent? How did you bring them home? How were they packaged?
They were just in plastic tubs with that garden trellis in it. And I see a lot of people just poke branches through tubs, you know, the right size hole so an interference fit. So I think they need that perch. They're smart enough to hang on to it, and when they got the option, then they can be on the perch, they can be on the ground. But I'm sure they're happier in what really is probably a stressful time of being transported to be on a perch and, you know, feel secure hanging onto something.
Yeah. I guess when it's dark inside a box like that and they can't see much movement outside, you know, it's just, you know, I don't think it'd be as stressful as having them lights and movement and stuff around them. And I think it's probably a far better way to keep them in a dark environment when you transport them than in a highly lit environment. So there's Stelios is saying, I'm sure you guys know them down in South Australia. Hey lads, at work, but we'll definitely be catching up on Carpet Python TV once finished. Hello to all my fellow South Australians, Darren and Daniel. There we go. So he looks like he's a mover. He looks like he's a mover.
Yeah, he's one of the admins on the Facebook group that I do an admin on as well. Yeah.
It's nice to see. It's nice to see there's still people out there that's really keen on, you know, really excited and really, you know, they part of the community and stuff. Have you got a local club down in South Australia, Darren?
Yeah, it's the SA Herpetological Community, and Stelios and myself and a couple of others are admins on that site, and we have social events, barbecues, that sort of stuff as well. So yeah, it's pretty good.
That's the best. I used to love going to those social events with a sausage on the sausage sizzle and you know, walk around at the Ballarat Wildlife Park. We used to do that once every year over Christmas with the VHS. But I don't think that happens now. I see they. Sorry, we're a little bit off topic now, but I see that they actually have the VHS has got a meeting coming up in. I think it's on the 7th of July. I think it's the 7th, but it's the first one in COVID days. You know, for the last year and a half. So. Nobody be going anywhere up in Sydney, will they, Brent?
No, we've just gone into 2 weeks lockdown, so yeah, boring times. But I don't know. It seems like a lot of the greenkeepers are a little bit more private than, you know, some of the carpet guys and Antaresia blokes all talk too much and, you know, waffle on with shit too much. But the green tree guys seem very, very quiet and private. You know, it's I know Brian Champion. He's helped me out with some setups and questions over the years, and absolutely beautiful collection. He sent me some pictures of some animals he's working with, and super humble guy. But they're not the guys out there.
There you're back now. I don't know what that was.
I'm back now. Yeah, sorry, phone just rang.
Okay. Well, that explains it.
Yeah, so you know, those guys
you're
seem to be very private in the green tree world, which is, you know, for good and bad. And I guess looking at the history where they've come from, there's good reason that they were all very, very private, you know, back in the day. So
Yeah, it
Yeah,
definitely is a different type of community, you know. And the fact was also, you know, that it was used to be such expensive collections that you couldn't dare say a word about having, you know, Darren, you've got first-hand experience about the shit that can go down when you actually tell people you've got a green tree python. So from the days where they'd rob people at gunpoint to steal their green pythons, you know, it was the thing to not do is to just we keep them and we just don't say we have them. I think it was more a safety thing than just, you know, that it's a, you know, you know, they're private, but there was reasons behind being private. You know, it could get you into strife if you told the wrong person that you've got a room full of green tree pythons at home.
that and the
Does
fact that at that time, and you know, I guess to a lesser extent today because they're more accessible, but at that time there was very few young people with them because of what they cost.
Yeah, it was a bit limited. You know, it limited people that didn't really have that. It was an elite species, and the keepers also behaved themselves like they were real elite. I'm sure we've all known the guys, you know, the elite at the early days. Does Tim still do a lot of work with them down at URS, or has he sort of taken a back seat now
No,
with
I
the?
think I think he's still got a few animals, but his business has diversified quite a few years ago. Not away from reptiles. He still does the reptile stuff, but he does a lot of just general pet stuff:
Yeah,
birds, cats, dogs, fish, all that sort of stuff. So
yeah, he used to be a big player in the green tree python scene. Him and Roy Pales one year. I remember the
yeah,
the biggest competition for each other. And what was that? It must have been 2009, 2008 when they really started to pump them out. I
yep.
remember there was yeah. So, but it's good to see that they're moving in the right direction. We'll have a look at some of the photos here of your snakes, Daniel, and just have a look and see. You can tell us what they are. And let me just quickly find them here. I've got your photo album here, and you can just give us a. So we spoke about the fact that people are people like to tag their animals as specific locality animals, and I've no doubt that there would be animals from certain areas in Indonesia. You know, I mean, I've seen people label their animals as Bayak or Sarong or whatever, but I think it's better to say type. I don't know. We spoke about it. I just think I was quite involved in that side of industry in the early days when we weren't quite sure where they originated from. But I think it's misleading to label something as exactly an origin. I think by going by something's look, I don't think it's 100% accurate to
No,
call
that's it.
them.
Unless you collected it yourself, yeah,
Yeah,
I agree.
unless you went there and you brought it back in your pocket, you know, and you know for sure that it came from there. But you know, like I'm sure there would be guys that would know. You know, I'm sure there would be Aussies that went overseas and came back from holiday and would know where they bought them from. I know that it was a big industry in those in the late in the early 2000s. You know, it was the way to get what you couldn't find locally because they were you couldn't find them in Australia. And then the local Aussie greens popped up in a collection, and then they were popular as well. And you know, that's all history. So let me just quickly check here. I'll find this, and you can just talk us through it. I know. Just going through your photo album. So what have we got here?
So these were the first two greens that I acquired. So one of those being the female from Michael Sermon, and then
so Australian. And how do you spot an Aussie in Aussie green python in a collection? And what's the characteristics behind them? How do you know it's an Australian?
Generally you'll get those white spots down the back.
Yeah.
In captivity, unfortunately, they're not generally not as full as what you see in the wild.
Yeah. Is there any? I remember there was a lot of speculation in the early days when these started becoming available in Australia. What's the thought process behind why is the stripe not so dominant or so obvious in captive green python and captive Aussie green python as what the wild ones are? Do you know?
Yeah, I'm not too sure what the answer is there. It's the same with the Arus overseas. Generally, the wild types have got really nice, heavy white blotches. But it's, yeah, you see it less in captivity. But Russell seems to have some kind of a secret because he seems to regularly produce these beautiful full striped Aussies.
Yeah. But he's been doing that for how many years? I mean, he would have gotten his first greens in 2008 around there. You know, I remember he showed me his. I don't think he actually showed me his green pie. He's very reclusive about them, but he told me about them. But he's been breeding them every year since he had his adults. So he's been
he does really well.
And I think age as well. I think they get the stripe the older they get as well. So what's next? What is this?
So this male here I picked up from Simon Stone. The last few animals he had were the rest of his green tree pythons. And someone from one of the Facebook pages put me onto him that he had a few that he was ready to let go.
Yeah.
So I got in touch with Simon, and this is one of his holdbacks that he really liked. He was selling them as a sarong label, but they're definitely not sarong type. But I went there anyway, and it was just a beautiful animal. Those white blotches and the blues, it's really stunning. It seems to, like for me, it looks like it carries those Aru type characteristics, traits. Those white blotches, the blue, black tip tail.
He did buy them up early days when he got involved in greens. He couldn't buy enough of them. I know he had a large collection of green tree pythons. He also did a lot of work with the green tree pythons in captivity. There's the same guy from. Is it a male or a female? This one?
This one's a male.
So it's good to have that type of genetics. I really like the amount of white on that, and it's just scattered.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Beautiful snake. How old would that snake be?
He's close to 4 years now.
Okay, so good breeding size. And what's this one? That's a good shot as well.
So this one was a red neonate that I picked up from a breeder, Darren Ford at Berserker Pythons. Yeah. He specializes in those designer type looks. Yeah. And this was a stunning animal, like red neonate, and it went through a really cool color change. And it's got some nice black flecks through it, and some yellows and blues.
A little bit of, what do they call them? The mite face, yeah?
Mite face.
Let's see what's that. Is that the same guy?
That's the same, yeah. It's a female.
Oh, female, yeah. Beautiful. Like the black and the blue. The blue stripes are the sarongs are that's like the ones that Russell makes with the blue vertebral stripe.
This one here is actually a yellow sibling to that red you just pulled up.
Oh, okay. The ones that Russell, the sarongs that we spoke of before the show, they've got the blue pattern down the back, haven't they?
Yeah, they're nice.
Yeah, the blue vertebral stripe, and then the bars coming down the sides of the flanks.
Fantastic animals. So do you have an idea of what's going on with this? Is it just so it's a sibling to the one with the black flecking on it?
Yeah. This one's a female also.
So you've got a few. How many girls have you got? How many girls would you say you've got? Definite girls. Is that the same one?
Yeah, that's the same one there. Got 1, 2, 3, 4. about 6 females on hand.
Is Brent still there?
I'm here. I'm watching.
Just very quiet. You're just sitting very still there. I thought you might have frozen. So what
No,
do
I'm
you know
good.
what your do you know what locality yours is, Brent, or is it a locality type, or is it a mix, or what have you got? What are you working with?
Sarong cross Aussie. Both of them the same.
Yeah.
Did they ever work out the might phase seemingly a random thing? It's obviously it's not like a recessive trait.
I don't know.
Not sure. Probably a good third of the clutch that I bred ended up getting black spots on them.
Yep.
But yeah, really don't know what the origins of their parents were.
Yeah, no one seemed to have a definitive answer on which way it works. You know, whether it's just a polygenic trait or where it's coming from.
That's the difference. Back then, people didn't want to say what the origins were, but nowadays they actually brag about it.
Yes. Yeah.
What is this? Is this going through a change, or what have we got here?
This is the coffee hour female.
So this is one of the survivors of those 5 neonates that Daniel was talking about earlier.
Just a high yellow.
One of the 2 that didn't prolapse.
So you can just imagine the others might have ended up like this as well.
Yeah, that's it. I'd like to make some more and find out.
Well, we saw photos. We saw photos of the adults, and all of the adults were that color.
Yeah, no,
Wow.
that's a loss, though. Especially when you look at that, you go, "Oh God, I could have had 5 of them looking like that. That would have given you a far better potential to make all of them looking like that." You know, it's really good solid lines and color in reptiles. Really, the foundation is starting with good stock. You know, the chances get better if you start with great looking babies. If you start with great looking hatchlings, the chances of making great looking hatchlings from those snakes are 100%. You know, it's just one of those things. It'd be nice to see more of these. It'd be very nice to see more of these snakes. I don't know why I can't go forward now. My Facebook's playing up. I'll just go full screen again and see why. Only goes 3. So okay. I think I might have been moving in the wrong direction. So is this the same? Is this the same animal? I think it looks like it.
Yeah, she's just coming towards the end of her shed in that photo. And then that's the fresh shed photo there.
You need some of those, Brent.
Yeah, they're beautiful, aren't they? I've seen a bit. Obviously, there's the difference in many people think albino, but there's a high yellow line, and some believe there have been some actual albinos as well.
Yeah, they were offered. I saw photos of them on offer from a usual suspect out of Sydney was going around offering them, but I could never. There was never an actual photo that actually showed an Aussie newspaper or anything like that. And I remember they offering them for everybody and like saying, I know they've had offers of 90,000. And I think the story was, it was from a video that somebody had out of Indo that had an albino in a video. And then that animal got smuggled over to Australia. And then that was, but nothing ever surfaced out of it. Needless to say, this was the same guy that was selling het for albino blackheads to people that ended up not being het for albino as well. So you don't know the story. You know, there were some really good crooks in Sydney that were dealing with the green pythons about 6 or 7 years ago. You know, so it would be nice to have the albinos. And I know there's one guy in. Who's the guy in America that just hatched some more albinos? There's a guy that
Marshall Mendes.
Marshall Mendes, yeah.
Marshall Mendes, yeah. I've been following that, and there used to be one called Floyd a few years back. That was a beautiful adult, you know, and never. I don't think anything.
Yeah, that was Damon Southey's snake.
Yeah, hatched it in an esky. You know, like you remember, I used to look at the incubators that he made. He had these fancy eskies that he converted into incubators, and that snake was just phenomenal. Floyd, I think his name was Floyd the snake. You know, there's again. Let me just see. Okay, that's for some reason Facebook only lets me go in one direction. Yeah, so If there's any questions, I think, let me just see. I think we did the mite phases. There's the yellow one. What's this one? We didn't look at this one, I think.
That sexing question from Lee is an important one. It's people trying to pop hatchies and things.
Which one's this, Daniel? Did we look at this one?
This one is the male coffee owl. It's a very pale green with a lot of yellow undertone, and there's some slight blue running down the dorsal.
You can see the head's got a lot of yellow coming through as well.
Yeah, and the eyes are just really yellow.
They really are the best to take photos of. Man, I'd love to. I should come and visit you, and we'll put that, whack them on a black background, and we'll take some photos of green tree pythons perch. Man, I'd still like to do that. What were you saying, Brent? There was a question about green tree.
A question from Leah Bennett, preference on sexing, probing, or popping. Obviously, most people are aware they're not an animal that you want to be popping at birth. They're very fragile back ends, and certainly not rushing to probe anything either. So I don't know about you guys, but I wouldn't certainly touch anything with a probe until it's at least 12 months old and a decent size.
Yeah.
They're just so fragile, you know, and if. But I do, you know, like I do feel though that, I mean, I did dabble with probing young ones when I was a few years back, and you can, if you've got steady hands, you can do it. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody, and I just don't even want to say that it's possible, you know, because I you know, it depends on your skill level as well in doing that. I remember they were straightforward, but you have to be so careful with the tails, and I just won't recommend it to anybody. But I wonder sometimes, you know, in the early days of the green python hobby in Australia, a lot of people were sent 4 or 5, because that was the deal. You buy 4 or 5 animals, and I'm not naming names here. I'm not referring to anybody, but I remember that animals were sent in groups of 4 or 5 because that was a recommended volume to take to ensure that you get sexes. And so many guys ended up with all males. That I wondered if there wasn't I wondered if they weren't being sexed and sent out on purpose so that people ended up getting all males. And that's definitely possible. I don't know how you feel about that. I mean, I really, it did feel like a lot of people were spending lots of money only to end up with a whole bunch of males.
Yeah. Again, because of the money involved, and you're essentially selling animals to your opposition, so to speak. So yeah, that greed thing creeps in.
But I do agree. I would feel safe if I was, you know, I'd get a couple. Brent you were lucky, you know, you ended up with 2 females.
Second best outcome.
But I think that you could 1 year of age at a good size, like I think if they're about as thick as your finger or maybe as thick as your thumb, I think that'd be the perfect time to sort of run a probe through them, and I'd recommend 2 people, and the one with the probe needs to be the one that knows what he's doing, so he can manipulate the tail without them breaking the tail. Although I do think in the wild that greens would break their tails. I just think that tail.
Oh, yeah, 100% they do. Yeah.
Their tails would be made to, you know, it's like an extra limb for them. So especially, you know, if they catch food and they're hanging by their tails, I can't imagine that they wouldn't break a bone in there if they're struggling around with a prey that might be bigger than what they thought it would be. You know?
Yeah. Well, let's not forget they use their tail as a lure as well. So
yeah. So that thing, anything could be happening with that tail. So yeah, don't get it probed. Don't get it probed as a hatchling. Rather wait for a year. And there shouldn't be, with these animals, there shouldn't be any rush. You know, I think. Unlike most other reptiles, I don't think you should be pushed, like Brent said. You know, you shouldn't be pushed to force them to grow and rush to breed them. I think patience is key with green tree pythons. I think that should be the 4th pillar, patience of the triangle. You know, we'll make it a square, the keeping square. Let me just, my wife wants something. I'm still going. We're almost finished here. Sorry. I have some keto pizza waiting there for me. That's my excuse, isn't it?
Status of peace.
That's like a good keto pizza. I had it last night. Oh, beautiful.
I mean, I've got the bulk of my collection as hatchlings, and it feels like it's taking a long time for them to grow. but I'm just enjoying that and getting to learn my particular animals. And yeah, when they get to that point where they produce, it'll be that much more rewarding.
Yeah, and plus you know the animals you're working with, you know.
Yeah. It's the reward at the end of the day, you know. It's not if it doesn't come fast, you usually appreciate it a lot more. Especially, I can't imagine. I reckon breeding that yellow female on a clutch of eggs. It's a girl that breed the yellow, the coffee, yeah.
Yes.
I can't imagine the photo with her. Just the sight to behold of a bright yellow snake coiled around a bunch of white eggs. That was so good, you know, so good. So
I'll be busting out some dance moves if I say that.
Hearing a scream all the way up in Victoria that happens down in South Australia. Yeah. So if anybody's got a question, if there's any questions, you can run them by us quickly. I don't want to drag it out too long. It's always been more than 2 hours. So I really just want to say thank you for chiming in. We haven't done a show on green tree pythons, and as you say, you know, a lot of the guys are very, very secretive about their. It's amazing to just see people opening up about their results so far. It's good to see that in Australia, at least, real results.
It's a really good community. Like what I've noticed is everyone's willing to help each other out. Yeah. There's a lot of guys that I look up to, and they're always willing to take the time to talk to me and about anything I have to ask. That's really good.
And you know, it used to be like that. It used to be like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it is still very much like that. So the real quality animals, you won't see them on Reptiles Down Under or Reptile Classifieds. These guys, you know, you've sort of got to be in the circle to come across those animals, and that's the best way to buy them. You know, talk to the breeder, make sure they know their animals, they know what they're talking about. I'd say if you see a green python on Gumtree, steer clear, because believe it or not, they do pop up on Gumtree. You know.
Here's a question. Sorry to interrupt you, Darren. There's a question I missed from Leah. She likes to ask lots of questions. Thank you, Leah. We do appreciate the people that actually ask questions. Yeah, we like it. We like people asking. So the question: what is one piece of advice you wish you knew or you were told about keeping green tree pythons? We'll start with Brent.
Don't put them in bloody fish tanks. That's the number one fail. It's driving me nuts lately. I've had so many cases, not just of green trees, of all snakes. You know, it's get the setup right, do the research, think about the humidity. You know, Darren says be the snake. Make sure you're on top of it and you know what you're doing.
That is the shirt we still need to release. Be the snake. You know,
be the snake.
I forgot about that. I got a bunch of t-shirts done a while back. I forgot about Be the Snake, and it would have been so easy to get done. I guess the operative word is fish. Fish in fish tanks. It's made for fish, isn't it? I mean, it's, I know some things you can keep in fish tanks that, you know, Zoomed sells like a starter kit, but you keep a lizard in there or a beardy or something basic, you know.
Yeah, get a hermit crab.
Daniel, what did you, if there was a tip that you needed to keep green tree pythons, what would it be? If you wish you knew before you started?
Yeah, look, I guess probably one of my biggest learnings is if you are looking to acquire a younger animal so you can experience the colour change, is really seek out a good breeder that's well established. You can clearly see that it's taken a lot of feeds, and you should even be able to see a video of some vigorous feeding. Because the last thing you want to do is get an animal that's not established, you're relatively new to it, and it's going to cause a lot of heartache.
Yeah, that is important. And you, Darren, or what did you? You've kept them for the longest year.
I'd say around the whole feeding regime. So, you know, once they're established feeders, you know, you've only got to walk into the room and stand in front of the rack, and they'll all be wagging their tails, going, feed me.
Yeah.
Resist that urge. Monitor that ratio between the intake and the amount of times they're defecating, and you should avoid most of those prolapse type issues.
Yeah. Biggest tip I wish I had was to watch out for not to realize that they've got such big teeth and they're so accurate at biting you if you get in the way. Because you only need to get bitten by them. You know, I've been bitten by carpet pythons lots of times, and I don't like. I make it a point to carry hooks and not touch them. I just go. I don't like getting bitten. I just go. You know. But green tree, you only need to be bitten once by an adult green to really understand, you know, to stay away from that sharp end, because and it's not, I've never been bitten by a green python out of, you know, most of the times it was just because of food response. Like you said, Darren, they will literally feed. A healthy green python would literally feed every time you bring a mouse into the room.
Yep.
You know, the other thing that I remember was, what was the guy that passed away from cancer that had Rico Walder?
Rico Walder, yeah.
Rico Walder. I saw him. I saw it the conference up in Queensland in Cairns. That was the last time I was there. That's how I know what Cairns feels like. Because in 2010 they did a conference here, and Rico Walder came across, and and he did a talk, and I understood. I think he was talking about 250 adult green tree pythons that they were working with at Signal herpetoculture. They were working
Signal herpetoculture, yeah.
And he was then talking about feeding routines with his green pythons, and they used to feed females. I think they had 30 meals they had a adult mouse, and then during building up to breeding season, they would have 2 adult mice in a week. Yeah. And the males would get like 25 feeds a year, and it was a mouse per feed. And that's how they ran there. And he was exactly the same. He said, smaller meals, they don't need that much. You know, as far as we know, I've realized now that we overfeed majority of the animals in captivity. You know, I think they do a lot better with less food, and food at the right time of year, because in the colder seasons they just switch off. You know, they barely use any energy. You know, they don't need any. They don't use any energy to survive. But that is one of the biggest tips that I would have liked to know when I started was, the same feeding. It's not necessary to feed them the big old rat or the fatty, like mice, something small, something like you said, 2 feeds in between a defecation, err on the side of caution rather, instead of walking in the whole intestines hanging out of its cloaca. That's the last thing you want to see with a green python.
Yeah, and don't be scared to mix up the diet either. I mean, we know that certainly the Cape York animals, as adults, birds make up a large part of their diet. And now nowadays we've got access to quail and things like that. So don't be scared to mix up the diet as well.
Yeah, and your idea about putting, what is it, quail feathers that you put in the
chick down. I used chick down then. Quail weren't available back then, but little quail feathers would work just as well. Just had a frozen one in the freezer and just pinched a bit of down of it each time.
The question for Brent. You see that question there?
It's all but done. It must be nearly over, because I'm on the last drops now.
I knew you had the cordial there somewhere. Yeah. So there was just one more thing here from Chris Fry. This last question. Question for Daniel: do you handle your GTPs? You go out and play with them?
No, I don't. For me, I think that it's a visual animal to keep. The only time I'll ever handle them, if there has been a little while since one has defecated, sometimes a very small handling session before lights out can bring on that bowel movement. But only if I need to look at the animal up close will I take them off the perch and handle.
The best tip I can give for anybody, if your snakes are lazy to go, is you take it out on the grass and you just let it go, and you just watch it, and it will just start doing these wavy motions, and you'll just see this big old poo come out. That's the best tip I can give anybody. If you're worried about a snake being constipated, take it out into the grass, let it crawl around in the grass, and within minutes you'll have a turd lying on the grass. That's the best tip I give for anybody that's got a constipated animal.
I
Or a
definitely think
nice
they do
furry
well.
rug in your lounge room as well tends to work wonders.
Or give it to your friend to handle, and then usually they will let it go in their hands, you know, onto their brand new shoes or whatever. I'm sure, Daniel, I'm sure every now and then you'd be going into that room and pulling out that yellow snake with it and just holding it and turning to that. Is it Gollum from the Lord of the Rings? My precious.
Yeah.
You'll be standing there with those.
Yeah.
I know I'd be doing it. I'd pull out that stick and just come on. I just want to hold you. Oh yes, I've got you. Yeah. Are you constipated, aren't you? Yeah, let's go for a little walk. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. So I just wanted to. So what did you say?
I was just saying, I think the less interference with them, the better they'll be.
Yeah. I do agree. Like the less less interaction you can have with your animals, and it's hard when you're just starting. The less interaction you can have, the better results in general. You know, I mean, Brent, how many times do you go and play with your adult carpet pythons? You know, and they work perfectly.
Never.
Breeding season comes, you know, they just do better. They breed better. You know, if you're a breeder, you should limit interaction with, like physical interaction with your animals. I think it's the best way is to just let them do what they do and introduce them to each other. There was another question though about keeping them together all year round. From what you've seen, I know, Daniel, you haven't bred them yet, but from other breeders' point of view, are they best kept singularly, or are they guys that keep them together? I personally have always liked keeping animals separate. But
I always kept mine singly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're best kept singly and just put together when you introduce them.
Yeah, I guess the other thing with green pythons are, do you really want them to bite each other? You know, I've seen photos of animals that have innocently, you know, males. You don't want to keep male green pythons because I've seen them tear each other up with those big teeth, and you know, I think it's unnecessary risk keeping snakes together, especially when it comes to feeding, because they mistake food and movement, and then they've got each other, and you know, they're constricting each other, and because they can feel the other one moving, they keep constricting, and to separate them is a mission. So I just wanted to, I know somebody asked that question earlier, I just wanted to touch on that. So I wouldn't I would never recommend anybody keeping, especially snakes, together in a close vicinity when there's food or any type of, you know, I wouldn't keep them together.
Yeah.
So
I'm sure you'd get a better response from the male, bringing a male into a female's enclosure as well. You know, a male that lives with a female forever, you know, you don't get that initial contact. And, you know, when boys go into girls' places, you see it all happens. You know, they pick up those pheromones and, you know, pick up the scent, and, you know, it's a trigger to start breeding. So living together, you might not get that same response.
Yeah. Okay, so I think it's been 2 hours now, guys. I just we'll call it quits. We could do another show at some stage about breeding and cycling and all that type of stuff. I guess it should be this time of year is the you know, majority of guys have got their green pythons together now. Some people probably have gravid females already this time of year, because I know they go real early in the season, depending on where. It'd be egg laying season now for them. So I just wanted to thank you, all of you guys. Thank you for taking part in it. I really appreciate the guys that are always up for a chat about it. I know I'm always up for a chat about reptiles, and amongst other things, you know, talk about a lot of things. Brent, as usual, my friend, thank you for chiming in. I know you've got pressing matters. Are you actually allowed to go to work tomorrow?
Yeah, we're essential, being part of the automotive industry. Cars can't stop. So, and I don't think they're really restricting anyone this time as far as working. They're encouraging people to work from home if possible. Yeah. But it's not like that was first round where it's essential or not. So, but for me, no, life goes on. I'm essential. Nothing will change, as nothing changed last time. So, you know, there's weirdo snake people that are normally locked in a room by himself anyway. So it's no real upset to my life.
I prefer being locked up in a room with snakes, you know.
Yeah, avoid people at all costs.
What is Daniel's got some technical difficulties there?
I think his phone's just gone flat.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right. Um,
Sorry,
but
guys.
Brent, you don't have to go to work. I mean, you're the boss. So, I mean, and you've got the State of Origin tonight, haven't you?
Yep, certainly a big one coming up tonight for those who follow the NRL. So Blues might have a chance of winning a series, which is a rare event.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll be late tomorrow. Might be a couple of quiet drinks tonight. We'll see how we go.
So good luck with your team. I don't know. You know, you probably support New South Wales, don't you? Or Queensland?
Of course.
And the lads from down in South Australia, guys, I really appreciate you guys coming. I don't know if Daniel can hear me, but probably listen back.
Yeah,
You
he's
can just
here.
you can just read, but I don't think you can. Can you hear this? You can't hear me. Can you hear me? No.
He won't be able to hear you, no.
Yeah, just relay the message to him. I really appreciate you guys giving us some input about green pythons. I mean, you're actively working with a good size collection. So thank you very much. To everybody that's watched the show, that sat through this. It's a little bit early. It's a little bit early for this. We don't normally do it this early. And I know people are up to start doing stuff on a Sunday, but it's usually afterwards where the views happen and stuff like that. I'll definitely get you guys on more especially Darren. I mean, you've got a wealth of knowledge, and like especially historic, you know, like oh, there we go, sharing is caring. There we go.
Sorry about that, guys.
Yeah, there we go. You're back. So Darren, we'll definitely get you on a little bit more. I'm struggling to get the other guys all in one place because everybody's got their you know, they've got their kids or they don't have their kids.
Yeah,
Doing stuff, whatever. So it's hard to get everybody in one spot to do a show like this. But thank you for giving us some insight into your collection, Daniel, and good luck for the season, all three of you. I'll just be watching as usual. And
yeah, it's going well so far.
Thank you very much.
yeah. Well, I can't wait to see. I want to see some more of those nice little marbles that you made last season. Brent, I know Brent got some nice animals this week as well. You know, likes to stare at them at his work and everywhere. That surrounds himself.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And just to the guys that have watched the show, thank you for grinding through it with us. And hopefully you learned something new about green tree pythons. I think the bases are, you know, like Darren said, you know, is the food, the hydration, and the activity. That's the three most important things to keep green tree pythons happy. Is those, if you can manage to get those three things done, you shouldn't have anything. And of course, the fourth big thing is to, you know, buy a good, solid, well started, well established is the way to go. And if it looks like it fell off the back of a truck, it probably did fall off the back of the truck. You don't want to spend big money on something that's just going to prolapse or turn over and die or whatever. And, you know, I can highly recommend, there's somebody I can recommend highly when it comes to green tree pythons in Australia, it's Russell Grant. If you're looking for a good Australian green tree python, if you're in Victoria, I'm in Victoria, so I always promote Victorian breeders. Russell Grant's the way to go. You know, if you're looking for a guy that will look after you all through the whole, you know, he'll look after you for 4 years until that animal's an adult size. So, I just wanted to say thank you for everybody again, and we'll see you. I'm going to try and do these a little bit more often now, especially New South Wales is locked down, so maybe you have to do another show next week, friend.
Yeah, possibly. It might be our only entertainment for a while. We'll see. We'll see.
You could eat your biscuits, and I could have a crack open a bag of nuts, and we can just talk about yeah. All right. Thank you, folks.
Party.
We'll call it a quits, and have a good week, and have a good night.
No worries. Yep, take it easy,
Cheers,
everyone.
guys.